This is Living Power with Abba.
And Jesus was addressing and treated the crowds as the flock. And what rabbis would do is they would teach their students prayers. And they would teach them by rote. And so when he taught, and he probably followed the teaching strategy of the rabbis of that era, which would be to sit and teach the crowd. He would teach, and he would teach on a number of topics that were only allowed to be taught by rabbis, by the way. And so he would teach on these things, and one of the things that he taught were these prayers. And he taught them to learn these prayers, and he taught this prayer. And so this prayer was probably repeated over and over and over. And it may have been adapted a couple of times to certain issues that were going on or that he was teaching on. So that's why it would probably have a couple of different differences between Luke 11 and Matthew 6. But we're going to take a look at the Matthew version because of its detail and because of its setting. And so we're going to break this passage down. And I want you to see something, because Jesus is saying, when you pray, pray like this. Now he's not saying pray this prayer. What he's saying is pray what this prayer is teaching, what this prayer is all about. And it begins with this address called Our Father. Our Father in heaven. Now, there are over 50 prayers recorded in the Bible before this one. There's 72 prayers total in the Bible. There are about 50 prayers right before this particular prayer. And not once in those prayers is God addressed as Father. Not once. Jesus suddenly introduces a whole new concept with this prayer. Now, the Jews were not unfamiliar with the Father God concept, but praying that way was incredibly new for them. And Jesus was saying, when you pray, it needs to be very personal, very intimate, and very real. There has to be that relationship, that connection with the person that you're praying to. If there's no real connection with the person you're praying to, then what's the point? It doesn't need to be public, it doesn't need to be impressive, but it does need to be personal, intimate, and real. And by the way, Jesus was also saying you don't need a human intercessor. You don't need a priest to do your praying for you. Now, you do need people to pray for you, to pray about you, but you don't need them to do the praying for you. Because Jesus was saying, now you can. By the way, I believe this is where our Catholic friends have it wrong. And I by the way, I don't, there's always been this idea that, well, Catholics are, they don't believe what we believe. Well, yes, a lot of them do. I don't know this is going to come as a shock to some of you Baptists, but there are going to be a lot of Catholics in heaven. And I know it's going to be a shock to some of our Catholic friends that there's going to be a lot of Baptists in heaven. But what really bothers me is there are going to be a lot of Catholic and Baptists in hell. But here's where our Catholic friends, I believe, have it wrong. Praying and asking other saints in heaven to intercede for you or to pray on your behalf violates the privilege that you have as a child of God to crawl up into God's lap and have this heart-to-heart talk with Him. I mean, that's something that Jesus gave us permission to do. Nowhere did Jesus ever teach us to pray to anyone but the Father. So, when you pray to saints, or when you ask them to, when you talk to saints, you're basically praying to them. When you pray to saints, you're doing something that Jesus never told us to do. He said, talk to the Father. Talk to God the Father. Be the one that has that connection with Him personally, so you can talk to Him and relate to Him. Now, the Apostle Paul made it even clearer that those who have the Spirit of God in them can address Him as Abba Father, which literally means Father, my Father, or it may mean Father, oh Father. By the way, it doesn't mean, as some have taught, that Abba means Daddy. It does not mean that. In fact, Galatians suggests that it is a term, Abba is a term, that acknowledges that we have a privileged status as adult children who are heirs. That's what's so significant about that term.